welcome to the Bible Feed podcast. Welcome back, Becky. Great to have you on. I'm Dan Weatherall, and Becky Lewis, it's great to have you return to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
It's really good to have you. So you've recorded a couple of episodes with us before, quite a long time ago now, actually.
Yeah.
So they are in the archives if you, the listener, have not heard them before, and we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Hopefully we'll get a bit of time. But the topic for today is really, really interesting, really personal for both you and I think is really important. So we're going to be talking today about neurodiversity in the church and in matters of faith and things like that. So often we're diving into the Bible, we're looking at the Bible text and trying to understand and explore those sorts of things. But then sometimes, and this is really important, we're stepping back and thinking about our lives of faith day to day in church, in community, things like that. And that's the other really important part of what we're doing. And today it's kind of that sort of episode. It's neurodiversity and neurodivergence and all those sorts of things. You're going to hopefully help us through this, and you're going to help us through defining all those terms. But let's just think about how, why we're talking about it now. So April is when we're recording this. I'm not entirely sure whether or not it's going to be released in April, but we'll see. But April is Autism Acceptance Month, so that's great. Yeah. But Becky, I don't know if you want to just introduce, why are you and I talking about this? Why are we doing it now? And that might help kickstart the conversation.
Okay, yeah. So I believe we both have lived experience of neurodiversity. So I've lived with neurodivergent people all my life. I believe my dad was probably ADHD and autistic, although didn't have any official diagnoses or anything. And then I married someone who was very like my dad, who is ADHD, autistic, dyslexic, and a few other things as well. And so he's a very interesting person to live with, never a dull moment. And perhaps inevitably, as neurodivergent conditions are inherited, we've ended up with 3 neurodivergent children who all have diagnoses of autism and ADHD. And very recently, I've received a diagnosis myself of autism, which I'd suspected for a while, having seen my children go through the diagnosis process. A lot of it sounded quite familiar to me. So just a few weeks ago, at the age of 44, I received my autism diagnosis. So there's a lot of lived experience there. And also I work as a music teacher. I've been working as a teacher for about 25 years. And I've had lots of neurodivergent pupils over those years at various ages. So I've also had quite a bit of experience teaching neurodivergent people as well. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, so a lot of experience there. So you can talk with real life experience and of everything that you've gone through. So that's great. I think it's quite common, isn't it? It seems that parents go through, diagnoses or assessment processes for children and then start to recognize all those sorts of things. So for myself, the lived experience I've had, in the household, I've had diagnosed autism in the household for the last 10, 15 years. So again, very familiar with that. And there's a possibility that there's ADHD within the household as well. And you start looking at yourself as well and seeing, genetic traits and all those sorts of things. And you start to realize the intricacies of traits and behaviors and difficulties, but then strengths as well. I'm hoping that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can do. And maybe right at the start, we can say, yes, there's a lot of lived experience that we have between us, but there is so much more out there, different individuals experiencing life with different neurodivergent diagnosed conditions or undiagnosed conditions. And they will be different experiences that they will have had. So, we can speak for ourselves and hope it's useful for people in their lives of faith, or maybe exploring faith for the first time with that outlook of life or that kind of brain. Hopefully what we can do is useful, but we recognize that it's just us talking. So that's the important thing. Yeah. So why now? So I've said it's, April, it's Autism Acceptance Month, but we did something else, didn't we?
Yes. So a few weeks ago now, we both attended a Neurodiversity Awareness Day that was organised by our community in Birmingham. So this was run by a group of Christadelphians who try to support the pastoral work that our churches do. And they're called the Christadelphian Support Network. They have a website if anybody's interested going to look at it. It is chsn.org.uk. So they organised a Neurodiversity Awareness Day, and I helped run some workshops there. And you came along as well and helped run a panel in the afternoon, which was great. So thank you for doing that. So we thought when we were there, maybe we should use this event to kind of kickstart a podcast here while it's all still fresh in our minds.
Yep.
It was a good day, wasn't it? I felt like it was quite a positive day. Some people found it quite emotional, I think, because we were talking about, some things that people find difficult in church and with faith. But it was also quite a supportive experience because there were lots of people there who shared similar experiences. Yeah, we tried to use a format that was kind of neuro-friendly. There were lots of breaks. There was a quiet room you could go to if you needed to escape. Or we had fidgets like these so that people could kind of keep their hands occupied. We had colouring activities and people brought along their own crafts. So somebody brought some felt dragons they were making while they were listening to the workshops, which looked amazing. I was very jealous of the skills there. There's no way I could make those. They look brilliant. Yeah, so it was kind of meant to be a sort of welcoming space where you could kind of be active, you could move about if you needed to while taking in the information. Yeah, how did you find the day? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was great. It was very positive and supported, like you said. I didn't spot the felt dragons though. I feel like I've missed out. But what you were doing with that, you sort of designed it. You were showcasing what a sort of positive experience of attending a congregation. I mean, not even just church, but attending some kind of event where you're sitting and listening. That could be anything, couldn't it?
Yeah.
But at church, it's very typical. You go, you sit, you listen to readings, you sort of stand up for hymns and all that kind of thing. And there's almost like a set of rules or set of social behaviours. And then sometimes not being able to occupy your hands or occupy your feet or not get up when you want to, and all that kind of thing, that can be quite hard for some people. So actually you were sort of showcasing the fact that it was fine.
Yeah. So even nowadays people can feel a bit kind of bit cheeky even if they could get out some knitting or something during a talk, as if they're being a little bit rude. But it's a great way to help yourself focus, and we do it all the time at home when we're listening to podcasts or whatever. I always find I remember a lot more when I've been doing something while I've been listening. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So you talked us through in that day a little bit about dyslexia, ADHD and autism. And that was really helpful, I think. You focused on those particular neurodivergent conditions. Why did you choose those?
So I thought I'd focus on those because they're some of the most common ones. So that would reflect a lot of people's experience. And also, I think those ones probably have the most impact on faith and church life compared to some of the other ones, which maybe impact people in other ways, but not so much the faith and church experience. So that's why we kind of zeroed in on those three.
Yeah, okay. I found it particularly helpful to talk through dyslexia, and I had, the misconception of what it was that, just you couldn't read out loud and, that kind of thing. But there was so much more about it revealing to me about how the brain views things differently, and has a symptom that might make it difficult to read, but actually might not in some cases. So that was, busting some myths there, and that was really helpful. Yeah. Now, we're absolutely not be able to go through everything that we thought about on that day. So is there any way of people getting more information if they get to the end of this podcast and they think, I want more, Becky? Where can we get it?
So the main information from the sessions is in 3 handouts, one for each of dyslexia, ADHD and autism. So I'm hoping we can put a link in the show notes to those. And they're also on the chsn.org.uk website.
Okay, excellent. Before we go any further, I think we should just define these terms. So if you could define neurodiversity for us, that'd be...
Yeah. So technically speaking, neurodiversity includes everybody. So it's all about looking at things through the lens of the fact that people's brains work differently. So everybody is under the umbrella of neurodiversity. Under that, we've got neurodivergent people, like myself. 1 in 7 of us are neurodivergent. And then the majority of the population are what's called neurotypical. So their way of thinking is in the majority. So society tends to be set up to suit that way of thinking. And then neurodivergent people, the 1 in 7, are the ones who are not so typical in the way that they think. I don't actually like the term neurodivergent. It kind of sounds like we're like crooked or a bit rebellious, like we're not on the right path sort of thing. And we've diverted off. But all it really means is that just that we're different to the norm and different to the majority. Yeah. Some people, though, like to use the word neurodiverse to describe themselves if they're autistic or ADHD or whatever. I think that might be part of the reason why is they just don't feel so comfortable with neurodivergent as a term. But technically speaking, if you need to have a mix of brains to be a neurodiverse group. So if we had a neurotypical person and an ADHD person and an autistic person, that would be a neurodiverse group. So when we're talking about neurodiversity in church, we're really thinking about how we can learn more to help each other, to support each other, and to suit everyone, not just a few or not just the majority, but everybody in our church.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And the statistics are helpful as well. So, roughly 1 in 7, which is quite high, isn't it, actually? So, it's not just 1 in 100 that, you might come across. Actually, if you look around, you get a group of 100 people, maybe you've got a church of 100 or a church of 80 or something. There will be, statistically, a good number of people there who whose brains are different. Therefore, you have neurodiversity. And also, I find it really helpful to think of neurodiversity as inclusive of everybody, because, even if someone doesn't have a diagnosis of a neurodivergent condition, they're still going to have different brains which need thinking about, making sure that we're thinking about the needs of everybody, effectively. So, there's certain groups of people that might need a lot of thought because neurotypical society hasn't thought about them for a long time, but actually that should train us to then think about everybody and the needs of everyone. So I think that's a helpful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we all understand each other better, then we all benefit from that, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So every neurodivergent person is unique. I've pretty much said that already, but there are going to be common features or common symptoms and things like that. So do you want to just talk through some of that?
Yeah, so some common neurodivergent strengths often do include being able to think outside the box. So maybe not just think along the usual lines that we tend to think. So they can be very creative, good at problem solving. A lot of neurodivergent people notice details other people might miss and often have very deep special interests. So they like to go down a rabbit hole, research something, know a lot about a subject. So that can end up with them being very specialised in something or, just incredibly interesting to talk to about different topics. So that's some of the strengths. Some common struggles might be struggling to focus or shift attention on demand. Even if it's something that they're very interested in or is important to them, they might just struggle in that moment to be able to focus on what they want to focus on. Struggling to be consistent. So we often have what's called fluctuating capacity, where some days we can do a lot. We can really produce something amazing or do our best work. And then the next day we might hardly be able to do anything at all. So we've kind of got a very up and down existence. And we often tend to struggle with things like self-organisation, may often have social anxiety for various reasons. And perhaps one of the most common struggles is being overwhelmed by our senses. We tend to take in a lot of information from our senses, especially brightness, noise, textures. So clothes, for example, can be quite a problem if we find certain textures a bit itchy or constraining. So we can often get quite overwhelmed with our senses, and that can make us feel very tired and often need sort of time to rest or time to recover when we've been out and about.
Yeah, and sort of talking about sensory overload and overwhelm into a church service is often a, transition of all sorts of senses, isn't it? Moments of quiet, but actually there's lots of people rustling with the coats or something, which, can be overwhelming because it's a small noise, but it's powerful if it's picked up by someone who has that kind of heightened sense. And then suddenly, hymns or loud music or that kind of thing, or maybe the lighting is dimmed. And it is you're walking from a sort of standard, typical day-to-day activity into a church environment, and it can be quite overwhelming. There's something I think that came out of the day. A lot of people who have neurodivergent conditions, they can carry a lot of shame because of these things, which is a shame. It's sad that is the case. But why do you think that is?
I think there's a number of reasons. I think part of it is what I was saying about our fluctuating capacity. So we think to ourselves, or other people say to us, oh, well, you were really good at this the other day, or oh, you produced all of this yesterday. Why aren't you managing it today? And often we get these messages when we're growing up that maybe we're being lazy, or we're being selfish, or we haven't got enough discipline, because we're not able to produce this consistent amount of whatever it is, whether it's work or it's homework, for example. So we kind of end up with this self-talk that's quite negative, because we don't understand that our brain works differently. We're just assuming that everybody else is coping with the same level of difficulty that we are trying to cope with, when in fact they probably aren't. And so that's why understanding ourselves can really help, because it makes us realise, oh, actually, we were having to try harder than other people to do the same thing, or we were having to deal with sensory overwhelm, and they don't need to deal with that. So I think that's part of it. And then I think also, we talked about this on the day a little bit, that our Western culture has made kind of moral virtues out of certain ways of behaving, mainly to make us good factory workers, it has to be said, way back in the Victorian era. So there's kind of an emphasis on virtues like being reliable, being punctual, big emphasis on duty, emphasis on also the kind of almost like reading in itself is a virtuous activity, like it's the kind of natural thing that we do, and it's the best way to learn, and somebody who's able to read books is kind of raised up a level in our kind of opinion. So people who might struggle with reading, or struggle with self-organisation, or being able to turn up places on time, can really feel a lot of internalised shame because of this. And a lot of it is coming from our particular culture rather than from, say, the Bible.
Yeah, definitely. The shame comes from trying to operate in a world, in a society that is set up for certain ways of doing things, and therefore if you're struggling to do that, or if interest is piqued in something else that isn't seen as the right thing to think about, why are you spending your time with that kind of special interest? And actually it can bring shame, and that's disappointing, and something that we can try and consciously be aware of to try and stop that, and definitely so in a church environment, to just try and make sure that
I think particularly for older generations as well, who might have less awareness of neurodiversity, maybe have grown up and not realised they might be dyslexic or autistic or whatever. So they don't even realise that their brain is working differently to other people's. That's going to be a common experience, I think, that there's going to be a lot of people in church who maybe don't realise that they are struggling with things that other people don't find a challenge.
Yeah, okay. So let's get a feel for, each of the three conditions that we thought about on the day. So we thought about autism, ADHD and dyslexia, and maybe think through some of the strengths said that's important to do, strengths and struggles in matters of church or faith. So that would be helpful just to do. Do you want to talk through maybe some examples of autism, first of all, Becky?
Yeah, sure. So some common strengths for autism include having the sensory sensitivity. So although it can be a disadvantage when you're in a noisy environment, for example, you might be overwhelmed by the noise, but it can also lead to other skills like musical ability, because you're able to pick out sounds that other people aren't so much able to pick out. So you kind of can get these small glimmers of joy from quite simple things. Like I can really enjoy listening to the same piece of music over and over again. I have a favourite blanket that I just love. Just little things that can make us really happy. But then on the flip side of that is we can get these triggers which we find really difficult, that can overwhelm us. So, for example, I find it really difficult in noisy spaces when there's lots of different conversations going on. I find it really difficult to focus on the person I'm talking to and filter out the other sounds. So I've found that wearing earbuds really, really helps with this, and has kind of increased my social stamina, because when I've got those in, I can stay in the room longer and chat to more people, and I don't find it so tiring. So there's the sensory side of things. Another thing is our deep special interest. So in church life, if your deep special interest is the Bible, for example, that can be brilliant, because you can really really sort of narrow down your skills. You can really focus on something that you're learning about in the Bible and enjoy it, and get a lot out of it, and then be able to share it with others. So that's wonderful. But we can sometimes get a bit restricted or a bit obsessive with our special interests, or maybe forget to take care of ourselves, or forget to speak to our family members. If we're really focused on something, we might forget to check in and check they're okay, or we might forget to message our friends because we're just really focusing on what we're interested in that moment. And we can also struggle with transitions because of being very much in the flow with something and then finding it hard to shift out of that to do something else. So church can be a big transition for us, to go from our comfortable home where we're happy and we've got everything exactly where we want it, to then have to get ready and go out and go to church where things might be unpredictable, might be overwhelming. We might have to do small talk, which is something that a lot of autistic people struggle with, is making small talk. We like talking about the deep, interesting stuff straight away, and conversation can be quite awkward or unpredictable for us. So that can be quite anxiety inducing. It certainly is for me. I find just making small talk quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And I find social time when it's structured. So I like doing things like a board game night, for example, because I know we're going to have the board game there. It's predictable that we can make conversation about the game while we're playing it. So we don't always have to think of things to talk about. And then maybe conversation will come up out of that. But then unstructured social time, I find quite a challenge, and I will have to kind of psych myself up for that. So just meeting up members for just chatting, that's quite daunting for me. Other strengths, we're very passionate about justice and fairness. So we make great campaigners, and we might change things for the better in the communities that we're in. But that also can get us into trouble sometimes, because we might be seen as a bit disruptive, or that we always want to ask why we're doing things, or sometimes we can be seen as a bit too honest as well. We might put our foot in it with people because we're just saying things as they are. So that can make things difficult sometimes.
And if I can just...
sorry, but I've got into my special
I can't stop you. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just on that sort of sense of justice and challenging things and so on. Sometimes that's really important, and I'd see that's a skill that in a church environment or should be valued, because sometimes there are things that are left unspoken that sort of neurotypical society hasn't brought to light, want to address. And actually sometimes we just need that clarity of, this is actually wrong, or this is, why are we doing this, or this is just a tradition, or why are you changing this? That might also be the thing. Why are you diverging off and doing this? And of the special interest of this Bible passage that I've spent my last 10 years looking at, then I can be the expert to bring that clarity to the conversation. And for a lot of people, they're not going to have that kind of background or clarity of just getting to the heart of the matter.
Yes. Yeah.
But sorry, I stopped you. I don't know if you've still got more.
No, I was going to say one more thing, which was that we can often struggle to connect with people, or to feel like we've got a relationship with people, with our church fellow members. And that can also translate to having a relationship with God and Jesus as well. I did these workshops a couple of weeks ago again in London, And somebody said, oh, yes, I can really relate to that. I don't feel like I have a relationship with God in the same way that other people do. So that can kind of make people feel like, maybe doubt their faith, or maybe think, well, am I doing this right? I don't feel like I'm being a proper Christian because I don't have that feeling that of connection. But that can just be a kind of feature of us as autistic people, that we struggle to connect with people in the room with us who are we can see, and so naturally we might struggle with a relationship with God and with Jesus as well, or it might look very different to how it might look for neurotypical people, but it doesn't mean it's less valid.
No, that's right. And you might have logically followed all the evidence and worked out that this is real, this is something that's true in my life. But you might not feel it in the same way as others may feel it, but it's still there. So that's helpful. Okay. Shall I share a few things about ADHD, some of the strengths, some of the struggles, but chip in as well with your experience as well, if you can sort of add to it, which I'm sure you'll be able to. So the typical that everyone thinks of with ADHD is the kind of hyperactivity. But I remember from your session at the Awareness Day, you basically said every word in ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive deficiency, or whatever disorder. Sorry, every word is pretty much wrong. It's just the wrong way of describing it, because people tend to think of the hyperactive child, the boy running around, racing around, being naughty, that kind of thing, which may well be one form of this kind of constant stimulation, this need, chasing dopamine, chasing kind of something new, something exciting, all that kind of thing. But actually that doesn't manifest itself in externally all the time. It can actually be very much an internalized thing. So an internalized sort of constant stimulation, a racing mind, that kind of thing, where playing out a conversation in your head all the time about, taking in the information that's going on, that's coming at you, but then that's triggering all sorts of ideas and things. You've got a restless mind thinking about all these sorts of different things all the time. So imagine trying to sit in a church service. Yes, you might be restless, you might be moving around or whatever and wanting to race around the room, but you might be okay sitting physically, but your mind is just racing through all sorts of things, because at the front or whatever is speaking so slowly and reading so slowly that it's just very boring and very hard to follow. So that could be quite a big struggle. And quite a lot of guilt can be attached to that, because you kind of feel like, is this not important enough to me that I'm not able to focus on this? But it's not to do with that at all. No, that's right. It's the brain's ability to concentrate based on different things, not necessarily just because this is what we all do. We sit here and we just listen. It's it's going to chase things that feel urgent or important or novel, or have that spark of interest that would readdress the dopamine imbalance in the brain, if that's what that is. So that's a way I think people with the ADHD would really struggle in a church situation. But sort of flip that on its head and look at it as a strength. This needing sort of constant stimulation or interesting new things and different things, that can be a really amazing strength, I think. It's sort of commonly said, isn't it, that ADHD people in a crisis, or they can't open the letters at home, they can't open the post, but then in a crisis they're the ones that can just, right, let's do it. We know what to do, I know what to do. This is, you do this, you do that. Go and call this, because there's this kind of sudden urgent moment that the brain just like, we'll turn on now. We'll actually operate.
There's panicking. They're calm, and then they can think clearly, and
that's right. And in moments of thinking about different moments of faith, maybe the standard sort of day in, day out, week in, week out stuff is going to be difficult for them. But then moments of like, this new challenge, or this new issue with the Bible text, or this new thing that needs investigating or problem that one of the young people has got, suddenly that's like a great thing that they can look at. They can hyper focus on that one thing or hyper fixate on that one thing and bring something massively valuable to the community, to the church in that way that maybe other people haven't been able to do. So I'm hoping that's those two things, a struggle but then a strength, the same sorts of thing can actually be really valuable as much as it can be difficult for that brain, that person. I don't know if you've got anything else to add on that, but hopefully that's a little flavour of what it might feel like for some people.
I think you've covered a lot there, and sensory overwhelm is quite a big thing for ADHDers as well, isn't it? As well as autistic people. So that's quite a big thing. And so both ADHDers and autistic people can often need to be careful not to get burnt out, because we can, as well as having those periods of hyper focus, which can be very tiring when we come out of those, we can feel quite burnt out from that too. So there's kind of things to watch out for in terms of not overdoing it, knowing when we need to take a break. But it can be quite difficult to switch off as an ADHD as well, can't it? So that can be hard. Maybe not the ways that typical people might switch off.
Yeah.
So it's about finding those life hacks that work for you, really, is the key. Yeah. So should we move on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was the interesting one, wasn't it? Because I think people have known about dyslexia for a very long time, so over 100 years, but there's still a fair amount of ignorance around dyslexia, as you were saying at the start. So there's different types of it, and we tend to think about people maybe struggling with letters moving on the page or blurring of letters and make it very hard work to read. And that certainly is the case for a lot of dyslexic people. But some dyslexic people don't have that at all. Some can read out loud very well, and you wouldn't sort of think they were dyslexic from the way that they read. But then what tends to happen is they struggle to take in the content of what they're reading. So they've worked so hard on reading out the passage, they've not been able to then absorb what they've been reading about. So that can make reading the Bible very difficult, because it's sometimes quite a difficult book to read anyway. And to add the dyslexia on top of that makes it quite a challenge. So there's that issue. And then also there's the different ways of thinking as well. So dyslexic people tend to not be linear thinkers, don't tend to think one logical step at a time, but will tend to kind of think more broadly, kind of have a broad big picture view where they kind of consider a problem from lots of different angles, from maybe bring in multiple disciplines to solve a problem. So that's a real strength, and they make great problem solvers and creative thinkers. But that can make it hard to, for example, learn things by rote, learn things like the order of the books in the Bible, or remember passages from the Bible word for word. They'll tend to get the big picture, the meaning of what's behind it, but not necessarily be able to quote chapter and verse, for example. So that can lead to a few struggles in terms of maybe feeling like they're not a good Bible student, or not a good Christian because they don't know their Bible sort of inside out in the same way that some other people might. But they really have a lot of other aspects that are a real strength. So remembering the big picture when people maybe are getting bogged down with the details, they'll say, oh, well, he was saying that about that passage, but don't forget that the whole big picture view is you need to love God and love your neighbour, and how does what you're saying relate to that? So they can have a sort of a different perspective, which can really help when you're discussing things in church. And they can be great discussion leaders and storytellers, quite inspiring people often. And it's just that they tend to struggle with the reading and writing aspects of things, but it's made up more than that on the other side with the creativity and the people skills often as well. But it can be quite frustrating as a church member, I think, if you're dyslexic and you maybe feel like you're not quite keeping up in Bible discussions, or you're maybe not able to contribute in the same ways. If you struggle to sit down to order your thoughts, so you might have lots of things you want to say, but struggle to order them and write them down and present them in a talk. So that sometimes can lead to a fair amount of frustration or feelings of not being quite good enough, which is a real shame. But this is where it's common for older people to maybe feel this as well, because they grew up in a society where it was very much about the act of reading when you learned about the Bible. Whereas now it's a lot easier. We've got other ways of learning. We can listen to podcasts, we can watch videos. There's not so much this kind of shame attached to struggling with reading. People understand it a lot more now. But we're still going to have in our churches older members who maybe grew up in a time where they were expected to quote things exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes, who maybe still have that feeling, that they're carrying around with them. So that's something to be aware of in our churches, I think.
Great. That's really helpful. And like I said, I learned a lot specifically about dyslexia and sort of realizing that it's so much more than what I had thought. So in terms of an awareness state, that increased my awareness massively about that, which is great. But also in this episode, hopefully this has been some increasing awareness for everyone, just that there is difference out there. There's neurodiversity. Yeah, maybe just a few couple of thoughts, other things that came out of the stuff that you were presenting, just to, as we think about closing. It's hard, isn't it, to balance the needs of everyone, and that's like a never-ending difficulty, I think, in a church. But you've got the parable of Jesus, haven't you, where the shepherd left the 99 sheep to go and save the one lost sheep. And there's so many ways at which we can try and apply that. It's about God's love and extent to which he went to rescue that one lost sheep. He's still got 99, but actually go and save that one sheep. And that's, it's showing just how much we should be trying to mirror that in our lives, in our churches, to try and help all the different people who may be lost or who struggle, who find things difficult. And there's going to be different ways that we can do this. Maybe that means having different events, modifying our events sometimes to cater to different needs, and modifying the activities that we do sometimes, realizing that some people are going to need to come to certain types of things where there might be like a social buzz, but then there's other sorts of activities that will be provided for the needs of other people that don't want that small talk. Maybe yes, you're describing, Becky, the kind of not wanting the small talk, but there's often a church will have like a welcome team on the door. There'll be people there that will literally, their job is literally to say, "Oh, hello, how are you? Nice to see you. It's good weather today, isn't it?" And that's probably the worst nightmare for some people. But maybe having a neurodivergent entrance where you come in, no one's going to talk to you, and it's absolutely fine, no judgment, that you can walk in and at peace and be part of it, but without having to have that kind of like small talk that somehow society has decided is a good thing when there's no point to it whatsoever. So
it took me a while to work out actually that I quite prefer turning up to places just after something started. And I think that's why, it's because I can just sneak in and sit down. I can sit through the service and that's predictable. And then if I'm feeling comfortable, I can talk to people about it afterwards. And then we've got something to talk about as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's been really good talking to you, Becky. There's probably loads we could talk about, but I think, that's more than enough to raise awareness of this. Like you said, there are some handouts which we'll put on the show notes and we'll link to them. And maybe, just to try and conclude, I mentioned this at the start actually, there's this diversity that the church was supposed to have from the beginning. And it's quite a radical thing actually at the time. So we were talking about the Roman Empire, what are we talking, 30s AD, and Jesus has died. There's the claims of his resurrection. This group of people suddenly start teaching people about Jesus. He's alive again, and meeting together with all sorts of different people. This massive project of trying to bring people together who are different, but united around Jesus. And that's, neurodiversity is one little part of this. It's actually something you talked a little bit about on your other episodes, didn't you?
Yeah, it does fit in really well with this. And we hadn't planned it, had we? But It just so happens. I guess maybe it's because this sort of stuff is one of my special interests that I've just ended up talking about it quite a bit. So the first podcast I did with you was Join the Dots, Connecting with God. And that was all about how different members of the church make up the one body. And so we're all kind of combined together. We reflect the image of God. So we all need each other's different skills and talents and experiences to build up that one image of God. And then the second episode I've done with you was all about what is church for? And we talked about some different purposes of church and what it's there for and what it's there to help us with. And I came up with 3 key features. And one of those was diversity, that the church should be made up of a diverse group of people, because it's the diversity that helps shape us and helps us grow as disciples of Jesus, so that we can learn from each other and help each other to grow up into the body of Christ. So, as you said, neurodiversity is just one aspect of the whole diversity way of looking at things, really.
Yeah, they were great episodes, so it was really good to think through that. And I hope that our churches can be places where people do feel comfortable, and maybe the society around them is difficult for them and they feel like they don't fit, but church is for that. Jesus was literally calling people who felt like they had no purpose or place in life or no meaning, and he was literally trying to provide a place for them, to make them realize that they can be part of this kingdom, this movement, and ultimately God's kingdom in the future. And so, yeah, the church is going to be a place which is made up of all sorts of different people who have had all sorts of different life experiences or have different neurodivergent conditions. And so there's going to be everyone there. And certainly the Christadelphian Church I'm a part of has all sorts of diagnosed and undiagnosed conditions, and we're all there. And I hope that we can all be supportive and help people thrive. So thank you very much. I'm just going to finish. I'm going to read just a short passage from Ephesians chapter 4. So the New Testament, one of Paul's letters, the Christians in Ephesus. There's loads that he's talking about here, but he is talking about this kind of diverse group of people. He's thinking particularly about the fact that it's Jewish and Gentile, which was a very radical thing at the time, bringing together people of all different nations and sitting together and eating and religious services together. So that was a big radical thing. And so that's what he's just talking about in context, but we can translate that to all the different diversities that we have in church today. So he says, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. And it's this metaphor of the body of Christ, the body of Jesus. Like every little part is all the different individuals, and they're coming together, and it doesn't work unless they're all there. They're all different, but they've all got really important jobs and really important roles. And together in love, they can produce something that's beautiful and something amazing and that can contribute to the world and build for God's kingdom. So that's one of many passages we could turn to. So thank you very much, Becky. Really enjoyed having you on. Really enjoyed talking to you. So thank you all for listening. Hopefully this has been helpful. If you've got any questions about it or anything that you'd like to say, definitely get in touch. You can find us at biblefeed.org. You can find us on socials. You can find us on YouTube. So just reach out to us and let us know what you think, and hope to be with you next time. God bless all.